Insight New, this is Symbolic responding to your video called Is This Islamophobia? A very clearly stated video. Thank you very much. I know you're not soliciting debate, and I myself don't enjoy the debate format. I like adding dimensions and aspects to whatever discussion is at hand, though I may end up taking issue with individual points. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to have to talk really fast to get so much into this. There's so much to cover. Basically, your central question is, how do I effectively oppose the expansion of Sharia law or Sharia law and political Islam without appearing to support racists and bigotry? It comes down to a matter of appearance, and I think you can overcome that by clearly stating the philosophical bases upon which you oppose these two things. When it comes to opposing political Islam, I interpret what I think what you're doing is advocating the separation of church and state. If that's true, you would say, well, I advocate the separation of church and state, or I'm a proponent of the separation of church and state. When it comes to the expansion of Sharia law or Sharia law, I think you're a proponent of a different system of justice. Now, I think what you may actually be objecting to is not so much Sharia law, which is law. It's not a cult practice, or I wouldn't call it a barbaric practice. It is law, including judgment, judges' decisions, history. I'm sure there are. Islam has a long history of attention to the law and the development and exploration of the law. My understanding is, I think it's a punishment you object to. Now, our own system of justice includes certain elements to it that come from different sources and have developed over time. We mainly punish people either by an economic fine, which is a form of economic damage, or economic limitation, or we actually start to limit their freedom because we value freedom, and the main way we limit people's freedom is generally some form of imprisonment. And we also have certain penalties like death penalty, which is the ultimate removal of freedom or obliteration of freedom. So what are the threads that run through our theory of justice? Well, one is that we imprison people to protect society. So there is not just an individual punishment, but there are crimes are considered crimes against society for various reasons. But certain people are dangerous. We separate them from society for that reason. Other forms of imprisonment are just simply punishment. We have a thread of we do have a threat of retribution. We still have this primitive threat of retribution and desire for revenge, which the law recognizes, which may be considered barbaric, I suppose. Also, we have a thread of rehabilitation, a theory of rehabilitation, that this will improve people. They will learn something from it. And there is a deterrence factor. You imprison people when people know that the penalty is loss of their freedom, imprisonment. They're less likely to do the crime. So we also have sort of a marketing aspect of it. And I'm sure I'm missing certain elements, but core is a concept of proportion, that the punishment should fit the crime. Now, of course, what's proportional in one society may be disproportional in another. A law, in one sense, is meant to keep society cohesive. Society doesn't destroy itself or fall apart. Different laws under different circumstances, may be considered, more necessary. Certain things may be unnecessary now. Laws that once were considered important and critical for society to survive, the current conditions may no longer require that. So there has to be a kind of analysis, and this may be the case. I'm not sure. When you're evaluating somebody else's, some other society's system of justice, we probably have to evaluate that. Now, the question with with religions, when they have punishments that are codified and are considered to be given by a god, there's a tendency to consider those immortal and unchangeable and to be applicable under all conditions. So this is the danger with, I think, fundamentalism and literal interpretation of religious text. There will always be somebody who will say, wait a minute, it says here that we have to stone people to death, so we're going to stone them to death because that's what God said. When in actuality, this is usually just sort of, I think, a radical element. I think you find that there are, religions, modern religions have a way to, reinterpret text under the different prevailing conditions of the time. You know, so this is fine. I mean, I don't agree with you either that one cannot call oneself a moderate and support Sharia law. My definition of moderate is non-militant. So one can, in my mind, support Sharia law and be a moderate because one is not militant. One is not trying to militantly spread this kind of law. Um, um, you started off your video with an interesting example of an island tribe that had a fertility ritual where which culminates in the thrusting of a spear between two young people engaged in the sex act, and this was considered an honor to the families. This is what I would consider to be a different stage of religion. I'm not really sure whether to call it use the word religion at all in a sense. I mean, in a way, it's a form of sympathetic magic. It's an ancient tribal mentality where the entire worldview, views mankind as embedded in nature and the actions of mankind influencing nature. So bringing rain or increasing fertility. You find small vestiges of this in relatively modern times too, among various peasant groups. Rolling the priest on the ground in the spring to increase the fertility of the ground. We still have that, I think, in our minds, but. It's a different. It's not like an abstract developed monotheism. So they're not really comparable, I don't think. And as I say, it's more of a form of magic than it is religion. Now, this worldview. A lot of times, you can't just take a piece of a worldview out without the entire worldview collapsing. I mean, this. Uh, uh, Primal type of religion often involves ancestor worship, totemism, identification with nature, identification with animals, the group being more important than the individual. You can't just be in a small society like this and just separate yourself out and claim to have individual rights like we have in a large developed society, because you then threaten the survival of the group. But the mentality of totemism, ancestor worship, sympathetic magic, you start pulling a thread out of that, the whole carpet falls apart. So, I mean, look at how many indigenous cultures have just been destroyed by interaction with our own, especially if we push our particular theories on them. We end up destroying the entire culture, and what do we do then? Offer people jobs at McDonald's and sort of grab people into our economic system, and where's the honor in that? Where's the meaning in that? We basically strip away all the meaning from people and just give them meaningless jobs. So, I mean, I think that we should leave cultures like that alone, and I think we have to be. I don't think we should impose our values, our justice system on other cultures. I don't think we even should level economic sanctions against them. I mean, it becomes a question of exposure, learning, cross-pollination between the cultures that, and our system may not be appropriate for other cultures at all. Um, so I look at it that way. I mean, in a way, you can sort of do an analysis to what extent is an exterior justice system. What can be removed without that entire system falling apart? I mean, can punishments be made more lenient without society crumbling or without the worldview crumbling? And I think this is true in Islam. And I think, you know, it's not like the case of the tribal case. And I think, you know, much has changed over the years. And as I say, they have a very developed history of law. It's a real core part of Islam. Yes, there will be nations that you know, that are run by radicals and have nuclear weapons, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a fanaticism with religion. I mean, you know, look at communism. You know, we had communist nations with nuclear weapons with a whole different worldview and economic view than we did. You know, you just handle it politically. But I don't think, you know, I mean, any kind of radicalism, it doesn't necessarily have to be religious radicalism or religious fundamentalism. You know, you don't have to have a religious content to it for it to be, you know, a risk. You know, Um, this gets into the nature of law. I think I may have mentioned that the scales that we use to represent proportion in our system actually came from Roman tribal law that involved ritual and involved the taking of oaths to the gods. I mean, there are various parts of our law that are based on. I mean, and to some extent, our whole system allows for individual rights, where in a small society you don't really have that. In a tribal society, there's not that luxury of individual rights because everybody, the individual is so key to the survival of the group, and people don't have so much of an identification with individuality either. But anyway, it's a very different case than modern, highly developed monotheistic religions. There's a lot more that can maybe be modified, but it's up to them to make those changes. All we can do is talk to them.